Welcome to Understanding and Using ELPA21 Scores, an ELPA21 webinar. We're thrilled to have you join us. Today, we'll explore how to access, understand, and use ELPA21 scores in support of English learners across our states. We have three presenters today. I'm Catherine Still, the Executive Director of ELPA21. I'm joined by Rehan Mustafa, Senior Project Coordinator at Cambium Assessment, and Joby Lawrence, ELPA21's Product Development and Strategic Partnerships Director. In today's webinar, we'll start with a brief overview of ELPA21's cohesive system of assessments, scores, and instructional support. Then we'll get into the details as we look at the central reporting system. You'll learn how to navigate to the central reporting system, log in, and access score data, how to view performance by district and school based on your user level, and how to generate an individual student report, or ISR, and your student data files. You'll also learn how ELPA21's summative assessments measure your students' growing English language proficiency and what scores to look for as indicators of your students' progress. We'll also show you where to find those scores on a score report. Then we'll hear more from the ELPA21 team on how to use scores for your overall program monitoring, how to roster students, and how to group students for placement into English learner services next year. We'll also share a few high-level strategies to use scores for classroom instruction. Lastly, we'll make sure you know where to go for any follow-up questions or any support you need, and how to stay in touch with ELPA21. Let's start with a brief overview of the ELPA21 assessment system, showing you all the information and how it fits together. This diagram shows ELPA21's cohesive system of assessments, scores, and instructional supports. Today, we are focused on the ELPA21 summative assessments, the ELPA21 general summative, and the ALT-ELPA summative. Those are the ovals in the diagram that are shaded yellow. We're going to do a deep dive into the key scores from the summative assessments that show where the English learners you work with have grown and where they need support. Those scores are in the blue ovals. And then we'll connect the dots, tying summative assessment scores to program evaluation and instructional planning, using the descriptors and instructional supports in purple. Now that you see how it all fits together, let's get into the details. I'm pleased to welcome Rehan Mustafa from Cambium Assessment, who will take us into the Cambium Central Reporting System.
Thank you, Kat. This section covers how to access the Centralized Reporting System, CRS, via the portal, how to view and generate scoring data within the system, and what resources and reference materials are available to support users. The state portal is organized by user groups, students and families, test administrators, and technology coordinators. Each section provides access to various platform entry points clearly separated to help users identify the appropriate platforms for their specific tasks. The portal does not require a login upon initial access. Users, however, are required to log in when accessing a specific system. User access within the reporting system is role-based, meaning access to view data depends on the user's assigned level. District-level users can only view data within the districts to which they are assigned to. This is the same for school-level users who can only view data of the school to which they are assigned to and tied. Access to the reporting system for those with a TA role is state-dependent. TA roles generally can view students that have been assigned to them by a roster. The reporting system is a secure, role-dependent system that allows access to score reports and data. To log into the reporting system, go to the home page of the state portal and click the Test Administrator's User Role card. On the next page, click the Reporting System card. Enter the same authorized email address and password that you use for TIDE and the TA interface, and then click Login. Next, we will review the process for accessing score data within the system. After logging into the reporting system, you will see the dashboard generator page. The dashboard generator will assist you in filtering reporting data down to the specific assessment data you wish to view. On the left side of the screen, you will select the test groups you wish to view. From the list, you may select Alt or General Screener and/or Summative tests. You also have the option to select specific grades for which to view reports by selecting the down arrow next to English Proficiency. In the middle of the page, you will find the Looking for a Specific Student section. Here you may enter a student ID to view all test results for a specific student. The Features and Tools menu on the right side of the page offers quick access to a number of features, such as modifying the reporting time period, downloading student results, and editing rosters. After making your selections, click on Go to Dashboard. The dashboard landing page will now appear. Test information and results are displayed for the students assigned to you based on your role. On the dashboard, users can sort and filter by specific categories and demographics to find data applicable to their needs. Typically, one of the first things a user is looking for is a comparison of their students' results to district and state level results. To view this information, we will navigate to the Performance on Test page by clicking on a test group name on the dashboard. Now that we have clicked on a test group, the Performance on Test page will appear. On the Performance on Test page, click the expansion arrow to the right of the assessment name. Aggregate scores will display below at the state, district, and/or school levels. To view the more detailed test results for an assessment, click on the assessment name, for example, Grade 9 ELPA21 Summative, to bring up the School Performance on Test page. On the School Performance on Test page, you will find two tabs, Performance by Roster and Performance by Student. Users can toggle between the two depending on the data they wish to see. Both pages are very similar. On these tabs, you will see the state, district, and school results display. By expanding the arrows in the column headings, you will see the 4 domain areas of the ELPA21 assessment: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. If you click on the information button next to the performance distribution bar, a performance levels legend appears that describes each performance level. We will now look at the ISR. The ISR, short for Individual Student Report, shows a student's overall performance on a test plus a breakdown of performance by domain. ISRs can be printed individually or in batches for multiple students. The student result generator is used to generate ISRs and can be accessed from almost any page of test results. Click the Features and Tools menu button in the upper right corner and then the Download Student Results button to display the Student Results Generator window. Depending on the test results page on which this is selected, the options available to you may be pre-populated or pre-selected, but you may change the selections whenever necessary. In the Student Results Generator window, first click on the Student Report Radio button under Report Types. Under Print Options, choose the report format and the PDF type. Use the single PDF radio button for a single ISR, or use the multiple PDFs in a zip file option to print a batch of reports for multiple students. Make the appropriate selections within the Select Test Reasons, Select Assessments, and Select Student sections, selecting the Next button after the first two. After selecting the applicable schools in the Select Student section, you may select a print language other than English for the ISR from the Language drop-down menu. Click the Generate button and the ISR will be stored in the Secure File Center available for downloading and printing. Users can access the link to Secure File Center from the upper right corner of the reporting system. The Secure File Center stores PDF versions of reports you generate from the Student Results Generator. These files automatically expire after a designated period of time. To download a file, click the name of the file. Additionally, within the Secure File Center, you can archive reports, delete reports, search for specific reports, and create custom labels. Here is an example of what an ISR looks like for a summative test. Summative ELPA21 ISRs look similar to screener ISRs but differ in a few important ways. A summary of the student's performance is listed as an overall scale score, comprehension scale score, and proficiency status. Proficiency determination levels are described as proficient, progressing, or emerging in the proficiency determination box, along with information about scale scores. The table in the middle of the page provides state, district, and school proficiency and scale scores results for comparison. Finally, as with the screener ISRs, the student's performance within each of the 4 domains are explained in the domain performance table at the bottom. Next, let's look at the other report type that users can choose to generate: student data files. This file includes the same information that the ISR details, but the report format is either a Microsoft Excel workbook, a CSV file, or a text file. Printing reports in these formats will allow the user to use the feature of Excel and word processing software to organize the data with a high degree of utility. The process for generating a student data file is the same as for an ISR, except for the selection on the report type and print options panel on the left side of the Student Results Generator page.
We want to ensure you're aware of where you can find important resources that will detail what you need to know and do to successfully prepare for you to administer the ELPA21 summative tests. You can access the resource page on the state portal. On the resources page, you can search for the specific document or filter the results based on type, assessment, audience, language, testing phase, topic, and more. Now I would like to hand it over to Catherine Still to walk us through ELPA21 summative scores.
Thank you, Rehan. Now that you've located the central reporting portal and your student scores, let's review the score information on the ELPA21 individual student reports in more detail. For this next section of the webinar, I'd like you to have an individual student report handy, so you can refer to it as we explore ELPA21's scores and score reports. Go to the central reporting system and retrieve one or more individual student reports for the students you work with. Please pause the recording here, and when you are ready, resume the recording. ELPA21 summative assessment scores have many uses. Scores are used to guide instruction of English learners and determine which students are eligible for reclassification and can be exited from English learner services. Summative assessment scores support assessment peer review requirements under Title I and meet federal and state accountability requirements under Title I and Title III. They fulfill ESSA requirements to track and promote student growth toward English language proficiency and provide valuable data to monitor and evaluate local English learner programs. Let's briefly review what ELPA21's summative assessments measure. The summative assessments are an annual measure of English language proficiency, showing students' progress in developing the English language skills they need to access content and participate in grade level instruction. ELPA21's assessments are constructed to measure the language in all 4 domains of English, the language of rigorous academic standards and content instruction. Students need grade level language in all 4 domains, or the domains they are not exempted from, to engage with instruction and interact with their peers. Being strong in one domain does not fully compensate for being below grade level in another domain. So at ELPA21, we use all of a student's domain scores to determine if the student is proficient. A student must be at grade level in all tested domains to be considered proficient. On the ELPA21 General Summative, grade level in each domain is represented by a score of 4. We will review this in more detail shortly when we look at an individual student report. In today's webinar, we're also going to cover the ALT-ELPA summative scores and individual student reports. If you work with English learners who took the ALT-ELPA, please have an ALT-ELPA individual student report handy. Pause the recording here if you need to go retrieve a student report for the ALT-ELPA. The ALT-ELPA summative assessment is designed for English learners with the most significant cognitive disabilities. Because the way these students communicate in English takes many forms, including eye gaze and gestural communication systems, the ALT-ELPA assessments are designed to measure language at the modality level. The modalities are receptive, which measures listening and reading, and productive, which measures speaking and writing. By using modality level scores, the ELPA21 summative results better reflect how the language domains interact to support communication with English learners with the most significant cognitive disabilities. This results in a more valid and reliable assessment of the English language used by these students. English learners are diverse, and each student is unique. Language development is complex, and every student takes a different journey toward English language proficiency. But for all English learners, proficiency in English is defined as attaining grade level English needed to participate in academic instruction and interact with peers. So let's take a closer look at what proficiency means on both summative assessments. First, we'll look at the ELPA21 General Summative, and then we'll look at the ALT-ELPA. This is the policy definition of proficiency on the ELPA21 General Summative. I'll pause so you can read it. As previously mentioned, we define proficiency as a student attaining grade level English sufficient to independently participate in instruction. Level 4 reflects the English that students need to engage and participate in that grade level instruction and score proficient on their statewide content assessments. Level 4 is grade level in listening, reading, speaking, and writing. A student who is proficient will have scores of 4 or higher in all of their tested, that is non-exempt, domains. So when ELPA21 calls a student proficient, we mean that the student has attained and can demonstrate the use of grade level English. On the ALT-ELPA summative, proficiency means the same thing as on the ELPA21 General Summative. A student is showing us that they have the language they need to participate in grade level instruction. On the ALT-ELPA, a student who scores 3 in the receptive modality and 3 on the productive modality is considered proficient. Let's pause here so you can read our policy definition of proficient on the ALT-ELPA summative. On the ALT-ELPA summative, we measure proficiency as a function of 2 language modalities, receptive and productive. The receptive modality encompasses listening, reading, and any other ways the student receives communication in English. The productive modality encompasses speaking, writing, and any other ways the student produces or responds to communication in English. Scores on summative assessments include proficiency categories and proficiency descriptors, domain levels and domain performance level descriptors, and on the ELPA summative, modality scores and modality performance level descriptors. Let's see how that looks on a score report. We've just reviewed ELPA21's definition of proficient. Now let's locate that on an individual student report, or ISR. Near the top of the score report, you will see the student's proficiency status. And just below, in this large box, you will find the definition of proficient that we looked at a few minutes ago. Remember, what makes the student proficient is listening, reading, speaking, and writing at grade level. What about students who do not score proficient? Those students are in other categories, progressing and emerging. Progressing means that a student is nearing grade level in all of their tested domains, but they still need English learner instruction and program support services for the remainder of this school year and in subsequent school years in order to reach grade level. Emerging means that a student's English is newly developing. They are still growing toward listening, reading, speaking, and writing at grade level. These students need the most support in their English language development. They need scaffolding to access content and understand instruction, and they need more intensive English learner services. These three proficiency categories and their definitions are found in that same box I just showed you on the individual student report. You may also come across the terms proficiency status or proficiency determination. These terms are interchangeable with proficiency category. Earlier, we looked at the policy definition of proficient and located that information on the individual student report. We just looked at the two other proficiency categories. This table is a larger view of what I just showed you on the individual student report. Here are all the proficiency categories together: proficient, progressing, and emerging, along with their policy definitions. And here is that same information for the ELPA's proficiency categories. Note that the names of the categories, proficient, progressing, and emerging, are the same. The policy definitions are very similar to those on the ELPA21 General Summative. Each proficiency category has virtually the same meaning across both assessments. A key difference is that for the ELPA, proficiency is measured at the modality level, and the scores that fall into each proficiency category are different. Now let's move on to look at domain scores. Domain scores and related information are located toward the bottom of the individual student report. Take a moment and locate this box on the student score report that you're using. This is where you'll find powerful information to help you differentiate instruction, monitor student growth, and evaluate your English learner programs. In the leftmost column, we list the 4 language domains: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Toward the middle of this box, you'll see the student's domain scores. We call these domain performance levels. On the ELPA21 General Summative, domain performance levels range from 1 to 5. On the ELPA Summative, they range from 1 to 4. If a student was exempted from a domain, you will see an E instead of a number. On the right side, you'll see the domain performance level descriptors. These are sometimes called achievement level descriptors, or ALDs. These descriptors are derived from the ELPA21 or ELPA standards, and they are the best way to connect assessment data to instruction. You'll hear more about this from Joby later in today's presentation. On the score report, you will also see scale scores. For the ALT ELPA, remember that proficiency is determined by the student's performance at the modality level. So in addition to domain information, you will see modality names, modality performance levels, and modality performance level descriptors. Now that you're familiar with ELPA21's score reports and scores, you're ready for next steps. Next steps depend on whether a student is proficient or still progressing or emerging. If the student is proficient, next steps are mainly for administrators. You will follow your state's exit procedure and work the proficient students through the exit process, adjust their status in your data system, and send out notification letters to their families or caregivers. For students who are not yet proficient, next steps are for both administrators and classroom educators. Administrators will look at individual student scores and consider where to place students in your English learner programs next year. Classroom educators will review score data and begin your instructional planning. The rest of our presentation today will focus on how scores support program evaluation and tie to the standards to help guide instruction. I'll turn the mic over to Joby Lawrence to share more about this with you.
Thank you, Kat. When thinking about how to use ELPA21 scores, we're focusing on 3 key areas: overall program health, exit criteria, and grouping and student placement. In terms of overall program health, we can use ELPA21 summative scores to identify trends in student language growth and proficiency across grade levels and across years. Analyze which language domains, listening, speaking, reading, or writing, show consistent strengths or show targeted areas for improvement. We can also look at the scores to help us evaluate our program effectiveness by comparing exit rates, growth targets, and proficiency attainment. Using scores will also help us inform program adjustments. It can also help us determine professional development needs and support resource allocation based on system-wide performance patterns over time. As Kat mentioned earlier, we use ELPA21 summative scores to determine individual student exit. Additionally, the exit information can be used in the aggregate as well. As we review the overall proficiency percentages, it's important to remember that this data tells us what is happening, but not necessarily why. The goal is to use these numbers as a starting point to explore patterns and ask deeper questions. For example, looking at grade level trends, we can check and see which grades have the highest or lowest percentages of students scoring proficient. If we have a consistently low performance in particular grades or grade bands, this may help point us to instructional gaps or curriculum misalignment, or even increased language demands in content areas in those grade levels or grade bands. For example, if proficiency dips in 4th or 6th grade, consider whether there's a shift in academic expectations or possibly a shift in support structures as students move into those grades. We can also use the scores for building level comparisons. We can look at overall proficiency rates across schools. This will help us understand why a building with higher rates may be using effective strategies that could be shared system-wide. Or if one school is underperforming, it could be a signal to dig into factors like staffing, teacher experience with English learners, resource availability, etc. The scores can also be used to compare progress over time. We can look at this year's proficiency rates and compare them to prior years. Are more students moving towards proficiency over time? If not, we may need to adjust how we support the English learners in specific schools or buildings, especially those who stay in the system year after year without advancing and eventually become long-term ELs. These scores can also help us consider equity. For example, using ELPA21 data to uncover disparities between buildings or grade levels, and then advocate for more equitable support where it's needed most. For example, if only 25% of English learners in 5th grade at a specific school building reach proficiency, we could ask ourselves, what's going on there? Is it an instructional issue, a support gap, a program model concern? We would use this data as a jumping off point for dialogue and investigation. How can we use ELPA21 scores not just to document student progress, but to make informed instructional decisions that directly impact student learning? First, ELPA21 scores help us identify appropriate instructional supports. When we understand a student's proficiency level, both overall and by domain, we can tailor the type of language instruction they receive. For example, a student with strong listening and speaking skills, but lower reading and writing scores, might need targeted literacy scaffolds rather than general language development support. We want to use ELPA21 data to determine the kinds of language supports needed in content area classrooms. English learners are expected to engage with grade level content. This is a civil rights obligation. So it's essential that general education teachers know how to support language development while delivering that content. ELPA21 data can help guide decisions about what scaffolds are necessary. For example, does a student need visual supports, sentence frames, or structured peer-to-peer interactions? Another important use of the data is to help us prioritize students for targeted interventions. Not all English learners need the same level of support. Students who are not making expected progress or whose scores remain stagnant may need more intensive or individualized interventions. And the ELPA21 data helps us focus our resources on students who are furthest from proficiency or who are at risk of long-term EL status. Finally, ELPA21 scores can be a powerful tool to facilitate collaboration between EL specialists and general education teachers. When both sets of educators have access to and understand this data, they can co-plan lessons, align language goals with content objectives, and monitor student progress more effectively. This collaboration ensures that students are supported consistently across all learning environments, not just during designated language instruction time. In short, when we use ELPA21 scores proactively, they become a roadmap for instructional planning, targeted intervention, and meaningful collaboration across roles. The ELPA21 assessment system provides resources to supplement the information provided on the score reports to help educators move from understanding ELPA21 scores to taking concrete instructional action. Each of these will be unpacked in more detail on the next few slides, but I want to give you just a high-level overview here. First, we'll touch on the difference between achievement level descriptors, as Kat mentioned, that are part of the score reports, and performance level descriptors. These resources describe what students can do at each proficiency level, but they serve slightly different purposes. Understanding both ALDs and PLDs helps educators target instruction more precisely and set realistic language-informed learning goals for their students. Next, we'll briefly highlight the importance of differentiating instruction. As I mentioned earlier, not all English learners need the same kind or level of support, and their needs vary depending on the task, the content, and the language domain. Differentiation ensures that students are engaged in grade level learning while receiving the scaffolds that are necessary to help access that rigorous grade level content. Finally, we'll look at how to bring in other sources of data, such as performance tasks, formative assessment strategies, and tools like our differentiation poster to help paint a more complete picture of student ability and guide daily decision-making. Again, we'll explore each of these areas more deeply in the next few slides, but this gives you a broad framework for how we use ELPA21 data in context, not just to understand where students are, but to support where they're going. ALDs versus PLDs. Achievement level descriptors describe what students have demonstrated that they can do at each proficiency level. Think of these as summative, a snapshot of what's been achieved. Whereas PLDs describe what students are expected to do across levels of proficiency. They guide instruction and differentiation in real time. We use our ALDs for interpreting test results and PLDs for planning instruction. One looks back, the other looks forward. But together, they give a fuller picture of both current status and next steps. Differentiating instruction uses PLDs to help adjust tasks, provide language supports, and manage expectations. In terms of instructional input, output, and scaffolds, these should match students' language proficiency levels in each of the 4 domains. We should be designing differentiation with all 4 domains in mind: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Some students may need speaking scaffolds, others may need more writing support. We should always be leveraging multilingual learners' strengths, not just their gaps. What students can do and where they're strongest in the language domains should help inform how we build access points into our lessons. Don't just focus on filling their gaps. Focus on leveraging their assets. As I mentioned earlier, summative ELP scores are just one data point. We want to be looking at classroom performance, grades, teacher observations, and a plethora of other resources to help tell the full story in terms of what students can and should be able to do with language. Multiple measures are a key to valid placement and support decisions for individual students. Consider domain-specific classroom data. For example, you can look at writing samples, reading logs, other examples of classroom performance tasks. These will help validate or challenge what the summative scores suggest. We have a number of additional resources provided by our partners at UCLA Crest to support the development of ongoing data-driven decision-making that will help guide day-to-day instruction, and these can be found at shop.nabe.org. Our performance tasks provide 2 tasks per grade band per domain, and they're locally administered and locally scored, which provide a quick snapshot of domain performance throughout the school year. These are also a great way to give students practice for the summative assessment, as these performance tasks look and feel like items that students will see on the summative assessment. Our differentiation poster assists educators in selecting scaffolds for both instruction and assessment based on students' individual proficiency levels on all 4 domains. Our formative assessment framework and professional development is captured in a formative assessment foldable that helps provide educators with support to make decisions based on evidence of language and content attainment. Let's take a look at these resources. Let's practice. We're going to take some time to practice using a score report for one of your students. Select a score report and then pause the video to review your student's score report. When you're ready, restart the video. Okay, welcome back. Let's dig in. This slide is designed to help us think about how we can use ELPA21 scores over time, not just as an isolated data point, but as part of a broader story about student progress. When a student first enrolls in a U.S. school, they take the screener. This assessment gives us a baseline, a snapshot of where the student is starting in terms of English language proficiency. It also helps us determine eligibility for services and gives us our first piece of the puzzle. Later that same year, the student will take the summative ELPA21 assessment, and each year thereafter, until they formally exit the program. The summative assessment is designed and aligned to grade level expectations that measure progress across all 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And this gives us our next data point. By comparing the screener score to the summative score from the same academic year, we can look for evidence of growth. For example, did the student move from a level 1 to level 2 in any of the 4 domains? Did their scale scores increase meaningfully in any domain? This kind of comparison allows us to assess the impact of the supports and instruction they've received in their first months of service. We can also extend this thinking across multiple years. When students remain in EL services over time, their summative scores can be compared year over year to monitor long-term growth. Even if a student doesn't move to a new proficiency determination, you can see increases in their domain scores, and this can still reflect meaningful progress. Using this data together helps us make better decisions about placement, support, and overall instructional effectiveness. And when we notice a specific student who isn't showing growth, it's a flag to start asking deeper questions. Are they getting the right type of support? Is their instruction matched to their language needs? And ultimately, this approach moves us from simply reporting scores to actually using them to inform our next steps. And that's where the real power of assessment lies. Let's take a look at a sample score report that you can compare to your student score report. Here you'll see a student who tested as progressing with a performance level of all 3s. What we're doing here is we're shifting the focus from the overall proficiency determination to what's happening within each of the 4 language domains. While the proficiency determination is a helpful summary, it can mask important differences across domains. A student might be performing well in listening and speaking, but you can see potentially still developing in reading and writing. When you look at your student score reports, you'll be looking for these domain-specific results because they're a key to planning meaningful instruction and support. We can also use these domain scores to support collaboration between EL specialists and content teachers. As I mentioned earlier, as you see students who maybe are struggling in one or more domains, you can work together between the content teacher and the EL specialist to reinforce those, for example, writing strategies during language development time, so that the student is getting enough support in both the content area classroom and then is getting an extra dose during their language development time as well. The main idea is to look at your student's profile and see how your student scored in each of the 4 domains. And then we'll take some next steps. Once you've taken a deep dive into your individual student score report, it's time to contextualize this information within the bigger picture of the student's educational needs. We suggest creating a student profile, which involves gathering additional information about each English learner identified student. In the example you see here, we have a 4th grade student, Josephine, who's been in the US schools for 5 years and also is a migrant student. Pause the video and review the information provided for Josephine. Think about what you might need to do to help her moving forward. Restart the video when you're ready to continue. All right, welcome back. Now that you've had a chance to practice with a sample student profile, we want to suggest that you create student profiles for each of your English learners. Working through the questions on this slide, which asks you to consider additional data that helps supplement the ELPA21 scores to make good instructional decisions and to continue serving your students in the best way you know how. If you need a student profile template, you can check out the EL Educator Toolkit at shop.nabe.org, and that contains a downloadable, fillable template for the student profile. Always ask yourself, what additional information should I be collecting about this student based on the context for this individual learner? You may have questions, and that's to be expected. Contact details on the slides that follow will help you know who to contact for what information. For Mississippi Department of Education policy, procedures, or approvals, refer to the Mississippi Department of Education website and manuals. For anything you still have questions about, contact Sharon Prestridge. For questions related to the assessments themselves, our professional learning, or how ELPA21 supports classroom educators and instructors, contact ELPA21. For questions related to the Cambium Central Reporting System, please contact the Cambium Help Desk. Be sure to follow us on socials or reach out to us directly if you need any assistance. Thank you for your time and engagement with today's webinar.